Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Nunes and I'm here to break down this weekend's pay-per-view event, which is UFC 277, headlined by the rematch between Julianna Pena and Amanda Nunes. But just before we get into the breakdowns, as always, there's going to be a Base AI recap from the UFC prediction software by MMA Play 365, and that'll be on our YouTube channel under its own Base AI playlist from last weekend at UFC London. So make sure you check out that recap when that is uploaded to the YouTube channel. But straight into the breakdowns here. Like I said, we've got a pay-per-view event headlined by the rematch, and for the Bantamweight Championship, Julianna Pena versus Amanda Nunes. And it's a really interesting fight, this. I mean, obviously these two were the latest tough coaches, the Ultimate Fighter 30, which we'll see those finalists next week, by the way. But these were coaches. There wasn't too much animosity until the last episode when everything was all said and done. Amanda Nunes had, something to say, saying that, Pena's been keeping her belt warm and all that good stuff. But it's a really interesting fight because I don't think anyone really predicted Julianna Pena to beat Amanda Nunes last time out and take a belt off her. And it was also a really strange fight as well. Like, I don't feel that we saw... There was something with Amanda Nunes. I'm not quite sure what it was. Maybe it was a lack of motivation just because she's been taking all these opponents out for a number of years now, and everybody's calling her the greatest of all time in women's MMA, which, is probably true. And she just thought she was going to run through Pena. Maybe, I'm just making assumptions, but something just wasn't right with Nunes. She was a different fighter to what we've seen before. And, maybe on the flip side, Julianna Pena was just that good, weathered that early storm and was able to take her down and get her out. But again, it just seemed a little bit too straightforward and easy for Pena to get her out. And Nunes was sort of smiling a little bit after the fight as well inside the cage. There was just... I don't know, I can't really put my finger on it. It just wasn't the Amanda Nunes that we're used to seeing. And that begs the question of, if that is the case, are we going to get the Amanda Nunes that we're used to seeing in this fight on Saturday night? And if we do, I think she absolutely steamrolls through Julianna Pena. But on the flip side to that, if Julianna Pena was just that good and does genuinely have Amanda Nunes' number, then we're going to see a repeat of the fight that we saw previously. I still think that Julianna Pena is going to have to weather a storm here, whether she wins or loses. But I just feel like Amanda Nunes is going to be different in this fight. I think she's going to be sharper. I think her striking is going to be on point. I think her jiu-jitsu, again, I feel like she turtled up a little bit too easily. Her jiu-jitsu is good enough to get out of bad positions. And I think that we are going to see a motivated Amanda Nunes, a fired up Amanda Nunes, and just the Amanda Nunes that we used to see. And I don't think we saw that last time out, like I've already mentioned now numerous times. I think that Julianna Pena, her striking's good. As a fighter, she is a good fighter. Her striking's good, her wrestling's good, her grappling's good. Obviously, her grappling's where, in my opinion, she does a better work. And I just don't think she's going to have the same success in this fight as she did in the last fight. I think Amanda Nunes, like I say, she's going to be fired up, motivated, sharp, on point. I think her striking's going to be crisp. I think she's going to hit hard. I think she's going to come in this fight with much more aggression than she came in the last fight with. I think she's going to be able to stuff the takedowns of Pena, and I think she's just going to be able to put it on Pena like she didn't do last time out. And I do think we see the belt change hands again. So I am picking Amanda Nunes to become the new UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion. And in the next fight, we've got a fun one for the UFC Interim Flyweight Championship between Branden Moreno and Kai Kara France. And this is a rematch as well. This is the second time that these guys have fought. They fought 3 years ago. Branden Moreno, in that fight, I believe, if I remember rightly, going back, I think I might have bet Kai Kara France in that fight as a favourite as well. I really thought that Kai Kara France was someone that was going to be able to put it on Branden Moreno. But the thing is, what we didn't know back then that we do know now is Branden Moreno was on this rapid development phase, and he is completely a different fighter than what he was back then. Back then, I thought Kai Kara France was going to have a speed advantage, a striking advantage from a technical standpoint. So having the striking technical standpoint and the speed advantage at flyweight, as well as having power as well, because Kai Kara France has got power, I thought he was going to be able to run through Moreno. But the thing is, Moreno didn't even need the takedowns and the jiu-jitsu, because that's where his base is, in the Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He didn't even need that in the last fight. He outstruck the striker, and that was when he was in his development phase. He's a different fighter now than what he was back then. So I feel that Kai Kara France has already been beaten by Branden Moreno, where Kara France should have the advantages in this fight 3 years ago, and now he's facing a better version of Moreno, who's a better striker, who's a better all-round fighter, and I think it's a difficult fight for Kai Kara-France because of that. I almost make the comparison in this flyweight division right now to what we've currently got going on in the UFC featherweight division, where you've got Max Holloway, who's the second best fighter in the division, and everyone below Max Holloway is just miles away from where Holloway is in regards to his skill set. But then Holloway is the only one that can be competitive with the champion but can't beat the champion, and that's not a direct comparison in this flyweight situation, because Branden Moreno has beaten the champion, he's drawn against the champion, he's gone to a close decision against the champion. It's just the best comparison that I can make to another division, because I feel that everyone below Branden Moreno is going to find it extremely difficult to beat him, but then Branden Moreno is going to be the only one that is going to be relatively competitive with Deiveson Figueiredo, who's the champion. And I think that not only that, but then you tie in everything that I've just said about this being a rematch. You know, Branden Moreno's already beaten Kai Kara-France 3 years ago. Branden Moreno's a much better fighter now than what he was back then. You can make the argument that Kai Kara-France is potentially a better fighter now than what he was back then. And even if that's the case, we're still getting both fighters that have developed and improved since the last fight, and Moreno still won back then. So I think from a striking perspective, that's obviously the best way Kai Kara-France is going to win this fight. He does hit hard, he has got quick head kicks. But I think Moreno, his ability to push forward, apply forward pressure, aggression, the improvements that he's made with his striking, he's also got sneaky power as well, so he gets the respect of his opponents. I feel that all that tied together from a striking perspective can potentially shut down Kai Kara-France on the feet again. And then over 5 rounds, you've got to assume that Branden Moreno is going to shoot takedowns, he's going to get on top of Kai Kara-France, and that's where he's really dangerous. He can lay heavy, he can float light on top. His jiu-jitsu is really good to see, and he's mixed it up with other legitimate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts in the division as well, and look good against them. So I feel that wherever this fight goes, Branden Moreno is going to be okay. Kai Kara-France is going to have his best chance from the striking department, but again, I think that Branden Moreno has improved more than enough in that department to, you know, be able to have the edge in the striking as well. So with all that said, I'm picking Branden Moreno to become the new UFC interim flyweight champion. And in the UFC heavyweight division, in the next fight, we've got Derrick Lewis versus Sergei Pavlovich. And you've got to assume that someone is getting knocked out in this fight. Obviously, the crowd is going to be wild with the hometown fighter, with Derrick Lewis. That's something you've got to be careful of. You go back to the Lewis versus Ivanov fight, and, you know, a lot of people thought Ivanov won that fight, but Derrick Lewis took that home decision in Texas, which has had some very sketchy judges' scorecards prior, but I don't think we're going to see the judges' scorecards in this fight. Like I said, I feel someone's getting knocked out. Derrick Lewis, we all know the freakish power that he's got. And to be honest with you, I think that's a little bit unfair, what I've just said, because it's not freakish at all. The dude's just an absolute unit, and he packs a ton of power. And it doesn't matter who he's fighting, if he connects with a clean punch, then they're going to go down. And he's fighting Pavlovich, who himself, you know, is a knockout artist. He's had 4 fights in the UFC now. He's got 12 knockouts from his 15 wins, round 1, majority of them. So Pavlovich has got that raw power himself, and even to the point where it's that type of power that he doesn't necessarily need to connect clean and flush. You know, it can be one of these weird glancing shots, but he's got enough power to put his opponent down. So you've got 2 fighters here that are looking to knock each other out, and somebody, in my opinion, is going to find that knockout. But then you look at Sergei Pavlovich, he's younger, he's hungrier, he's making his surge up into the top of the division, his first surge up into the top as well. So he's definitely got some momentum behind him on the win streak. And I also feel from a physical perspective, he's faster, and that's going to be important in this fight. He's faster, he's got more volume. Derrick Lewis lacks volume, plodding, walking type of fighter until he explodes. Derrick Lewis's explosions are something Pavlovich has got to be careful of. But like I said, Pavlovich is going to have a speed advantage here. He's also got the longer reach, 5-inch reach advantage. I think that's going to play a factor here in a fight that's more than likely going to be won and lost on the feet. So I think that Pavlovich has got some physical advantages, speed, movement, volume. The power, I don't think he's as crazy as Derrick Lewis's, but listen, Derrick Lewis, you can't ignore the fact that he's been knocked out in 6 of his 9 losses, and also he's coming off a bad knockout just 5 months since his last fight against Tai Tuivasa as well. So I feel that there's a lot of upside on the side of Sergei Pavlovich here, who, like I said, is the younger, hungrier fighter, longer, quicker, more volume. So for those reasons, I'm picking Sergei Pavlovich to win this fight. And in the next fight, also in the flyweight division, just like the interim championship, which is interesting, this fight's on the card as well. We've got Alexandre Pantoja versus Alex Perez. And I think this is a really good fight. I just hope that the fight stays together, because Alex Perez has just had a really bad time of, you know, actually stepping into the octagon on a Saturday night. He's been matched numerous times now. He's had to pull out because of certain illnesses. His opponents have had to pull out because of illnesses. Fighters not making weight. It's been a real mess. And if you actually look back at Perez's history as a flyweight fighter, even outside of the UFC, he's missed weight on numerous occasions. So I really hope that this fight does go ahead, because it's a great fight. Alexandre Pantoja is a really good all-round fighter, jiu-jitsu black belt. He's got a good Muay Thai style striking game, and he's a difficult fighter to beat. But then on the other side, you've got Alex Perez, whose background's in wrestling. He's got decent jiu-jitsu himself. His striking is on point, puts combinations together, really hard low calf kicks as well. So when you put the fight together completely, you've got, in my opinion, a big advantage for Alex Perez in the wrestling, but then the jiu-jitsu advantage goes to Pantoja. So it's almost, if there is wrestling exchanges in this fight, it's more than likely going to be Perez on top of Pantoja. Pantoja does have some good sweeps and reversals, but I do think Perez is savvy enough on the mat to stay safe on top after the initial takedown. The only real concern here is that Perez has been guillotined a number of times, but Pantoja is more of a sweep, reverse, take you back, get a rear naked choke type of submission artist. So I think on the feet, I think Pantoja is good. I don't think there's going to be a massive edge here, but I do think that Alex Perez is going to be slightly more explosive, throw more volume. I also, like I've already said, I really like those low calf kicks. He finished Jussier Formiga with numerous low calf kicks, eventually shut his leg down. So I think that Alex Perez is a slightly more dynamic striker. I think he's a little bit quicker, will apply slightly more aggression, slightly more volume on the feet, and he's dangerous with those low calf kicks. And I think that for Pantoja to have real success here, he's got to be able to get on top of Alex Perez, and I think that's going to be difficult because Perez has got the wrestling advantage. So I think it's going to be a close fight. It wouldn't shock me for Pantoja to submit Alex Perez, because that's definitely a legitimate path to victory. But I do think that the edge is slightly with Perez in the striking, and the grappling exchanges is more than likely going to be Perez on top rather than on bottom. So for those reasons, I'm picking Alex Perez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Magomed Ankalaev versus Anthony Smith. Now, Ankalaev is someone that I've touted to be a future UFC champion for a number of years now. 3 fighters when they came into the UFC, I said they were going to be UFC champions. 3 Russians, Magomed Ankalaev, Khamzat Chimaev, and Islam Makhachev. So obviously Makhachev's got that title shot. I'm pretty sure Khamzat Chimaev is going to have it within the next 18 months as well. And I think the same for Ankalaev as well. And obviously Ankalaev is still in that building process up the division. And I think this fight is, I think you've got to show a lot of respect for both fighters, because Anthony Smith, I can't imagine too many people are holding their hands up right now to fight Magomed Ankalaev. And Magomed Ankalaev has probably got a good argument to wait for a title shot, but he's not waiting around. He's happy to take another fight. So both fighters definitely deserve respect for taking this fight. But I think it's a really, really tough fight for Anthony Smith. I think that Ankalaev is the better striker, is the better wrestler, is the better grappler. He's got 5-round cardio. He can fight aggressively. He can fight patiently. He's got good volume. He's got power as well. He can switch stances, fight in both stances. So I think that Anthony Smith, like I've already said, he's got a tough fight ahead of him. It's hard to see where Smith wins that fight unless he just cracks Ankalaev with something hard. I think it's a low percentage outcome because we've not seen Ankalaev, be that susceptible to, leaving those dangerous openings. And when he has been hit, he hasn't ever looked like he's been hurt, rocked, wobbled or anything like that. So I think we're making assumptions on a low percentage outcome that Anthony Smith could knock him out. Having said that, it's a light heavyweight division. There's 4 rounds gloves. This is mixed martial arts. And this is the UFC. A clean flush punch could land and it could knock Ankalaev out. But outside of that, like I said, I think Ankalaev is going to hurt Smith on the feet. I think the way he mixes his kicks with his punches as well and just switches and changes everything up in the striking department. Ankalaev is the total package. Amazing striker, amazing wrestler, crushing top game as well if he can get on top. And again, Anthony Smith has shown a lack of ability to be able to defend takedowns against good wrestlers, like he struggled against Rakic, for example. I think he's going to struggle against Ankalaev. I'm not sure where Ankalaev is going to take this fight in regards to keeping it on the feet or taking it down to the mat, but wherever it goes, Ankalaev's the better fighter. For that reason, I'm picking Magomed Ankalaev to win this fight. And in the next fight, I think this is actually going to be a low-key fun fight as well. We've got Alex Morono versus Matthew Semelsberger. Now, Alex Morono, I feel, is the better technical fighter. He's got more experience, but he's got this ability to just turn fights into dogfights. Even when he probably should be staying technical, he just loves getting in these dogfights. And the thing is, I think Matthew Semelsberger is... That's his style. So I think even if Alex Morono does try and stay patient early in this fight and be a bit technical, I think the style of Semelsberger getting into range, getting in the face of his opponents and just making fights ugly, dirty, gritty, and like I said, a bit of a dogfight, I think is just going to entice Alex Morono into that style. I think if Morono does stay technical for 3 rounds here, he should be able to win this fight. I think he's a good fighter on the mat, grappling. He's a BJJ black belt. On the feet, he's technical with his striking, nice, good fundamentals, doesn't overexert himself, again, outside of these dogfights. So I think that from a technical perspective, wherever the fight goes, Alex Morono's the better fighter, but Semelsberger just brings that dogfight, and I think it's going to entice Alex Morono in. And ultimately, I know this is going to sound strange and there's no logic behind the words really, but I think Semelsberger is just going to outdog Alex Morono in this fight. I think it's going to be an ugly, close fight that's likely going to go to a decision unless somebody is caught. And I think that Semelsberger is going to be able to make things just a little bit uglier. I think he's going to look a little bit better in the judges' eyes because of that. I think he's going to slightly come better on the close exchanges inside of the boxing range where they're swinging, or if they're clinched up and they're throwing elbows. I think Semelsberger is going to just come a little bit better in those scenarios. And like I said, I just don't think Morono is going to be able to keep this fight technical for 3 rounds, enough to be able to keep this fight clean and take a clean win from Semelsberger. I think it's going to be a dog fight. I think Semelsberger's the dog, the bigger dog in this fight, not technically on the betting line, but I mean in regards to the heart and the cardio and the grit. So for that reason, I'm going to pick Matthew Semelsberger to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Drew Dober versus Rafael Alves. Interesting fight. Drew Dober, last time out against Terence McKinney. Wow, Terence McKinney came out the blocks like a bull, fast, hard. Dober weathered a storm, but then showed the levels in MMA. Drew Dober's still a very good fighter, and I think he does have a ceiling, and we know where that ceiling is. But outside of that ceiling and the fighters that are upcoming slightly below him, I just think they're going to have a very difficult time against Dober because he's a good striker, Muay Thai background, he can wrestle, he can grapple, he's got a good topside game as well. And I think Rafael Alves is going to come out fast, he's going to come out hard. And we've just seen that. We've just seen how Drew Dober copes with that type of fighter. I think if we'd not seen that Terence McKinney fight, I think there'd be more question marks here. But we've seen Terence McKinney come out fast and hard at Dober. I think that Rafael Alves is going to do exactly the same. So because of that, I think Dober's going to be able to weather any storm that Rafael Alves throws at him. I've still got question marks on the cardio of Rafael Alves, even though he's now fighting up a weight class. I think because of his style, because he's so well built, he's got muscle mass and he comes out hard early on, you're always going to have those cardio questions until you've seen it numerous times over 3 rounds that he can sustain that pace and pressure. But I think Drew Dober's just the better fighter, unless Dober shoots him for a takedown and Alves grabs that guillotine choke that he loves, that not many fighters escape. I just don't see him winning the fight. I think Drew Dober's the better technical fighter. I think he's got more power as well. He's got better volume, better combinations, better technique on the feet. And then when you look at the wrestling, like I said, I feel like if Alves tries to take Dober down, Dober's going to be able to stuff the takedowns. I think the defensive wrestling of Dober is better than the offensive wrestling of Rafael Alves, and I feel vice versa as well. I feel like the offensive wrestling of Dober is better than the defensive wrestling of Alves. So I think Dober could take Alves down as well. If Dober takes Alves down, I think his jiu-jitsu's good enough to remain heavy on top of Alves. I think it's a difficult fight for Rafael Alves because I think Dober's just edging him in every single area. For that reason, I'm picking Drew Dober to win this fight. And in the next fight, interesting in the heavyweight division, we've got Don'Tale Mayes versus the newcomer coming in on short notice, Hamdy Abdelwahab. Now, Hamdy Abdelwahab is a mouthful to say for a start, but he's 3-0. I've got some question marks on him in regards to level of competition he's been fighting. He's also fought a couple of times for Jorge Masvidal's promotion as well, the bare knuckle MMA promotion. But what we've seen outside of that, he's 3-0 in MMA. And again, the question marks are there in regards to the level of opponents he's been fighting. But if you do watch tape on Abdelwahab, he's a very aggressive heavyweight. It looks like he's got decent cardio, actually. And again, this is another thing that I'm really intrigued to see once he has a bit of resistance from an opponent, because his pace and pressure is really heavy in the first round. He's also got good wrestling. He's got good trips. He's also shoots in well. He's got well-timed entries into single legs and double legs, you know, the traditional wrestling style takedowns. And he seemed to have good cardio throughout the last fight that he had, when he was putting on this high pace and putting everything together, but he wasn't having too much back in return from his opponent. So it's going to be really interesting to see in the UFC when he does get that, what he's going to be like. I'm always going to have question marks for fighters that are in the UFC that are 3-0. They've only had 3 professional MMA fights. Now, Don'Tale Mayes, this fight's a nightmare for me to say for both fighters, but for Mayes, I feel like with his UFC experience, I don't feel like he's a fighter that's got a super high ceiling in the UFC, if I'm being honest. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just think there's a lot of fighters that are better quality in the division. But I think Mayes has got a good enough experience right now to be able to make this a difficult fight for Abdelwahab. And these question marks that I've got of Abdelwahab, I think that Mayes is going to be able to really test that. Now, Abdelwahab, in my opinion, I think he's going to look for takedowns in this fight. I don't think he's going to stand and strike for too long with Mayes. I think Mayes is a fighter that is going to be difficult to beat at this level. And Wahab making his UFC debut on short notice at 3-0, there's just too many question marks, too many red flags for me to pick him in this fight. He could come in here, though, and look great. This could be a good fight for him to look great. But I am going to trust and side more with the fighter that has that UFC experience, plenty of it. He's fought some great fighters as well, including Cyril Gane. So that fighter to me is a little bit more trustworthy. And it's not as if Mayes is completely and utterly outmatched in one particular area in this fight anyway. And he's had the full training camp. So for those reasons, I am going to side slightly with Don'Tale Mayes to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Drakkar Klose versus Rafa Garcia. And again, I think it's one of those fights that's going to be fun. It's going to be competitive in moments, but I just think Drakkar Klose is going to have too much for Rafa Garcia. I think Klose, again, he's got the experience. He's been in there with some of the best fighters in the division. And I think Rafa Garcia is always a game fighter. He's always going to be in your face. He's always going to be tough to beat and tough to make him go away. But like I said, I think Drakkar Klose is just going to have a slight edge in every single area here. I think he's going to be the slightly better striker. I think he's going to be the slightly better wrestler. I think he's going to be the slightly better grappler. I think Garcia is going to be in his face. He is going to keep this fight competitive. But when you're looking at the rounds going by and who's edging them, and if Drakkar Klose does feel himself slipping away a little bit, then he's got that veteran experience to know that he's been there before against a better level competition and being able to push through and come back in the fight as well. I think that Rafa Garcia is going to be able to find some takedowns in this fight. I think he is going to be able to have some top control time, but I just cannot see Drakkar Klose getting taken down and just held down for long periods with Rafa Garcia just rolling on him on top. And then when the fight's on the feet, I think Rafa Garcia will have opportunities to maybe catch, hurt, and potentially rock Klose and get his respect. But again, it's low percentage outcomes. I just feel that Klose is going to be the more technical fighter. He's going to have a better level of fight IQ with the experience that he's got in the UFC. And like I've already said, I think he edges the wrestling and edges the grappling as well, both offensively and defensively. So for those reasons, I do think it's going to be a tough fight for Garcia to get the win, even though it's going to be competitive. But I'm picking Drakkar Klose to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Michael Morales fighting the UFC newcomer, the debutant, stepping in on short notice, Adam Fugitt. Now, Adam Fugitt's a bit of an awkward fighter. He's long. He likes to throw awkward strikes, kicks to the head. Like, you look at his last fight, he just spammed kicks to the head. He also reminds me a little bit in regards to the frame of somebody like Bill Algeo, being that tall, long, awkward fighter. And I feel like a lot of fighters are going to find it very difficult to get reads on Fugitt, at least early in fights anyway. But Michael Morales stands on the other side. Now, Morales, for me, is an absolute beast. He's a fighter that can do everything, a good, dangerous Muay Thai striking style, but then he's got a good wrestling game. He's got a good jiu-jitsu game. He can lay heavy on top. He's a nightmare wherever this fight goes. And I think he's going to be a really difficult fighter to beat in this division. I'm really disappointed actually that Ramiz Brahimaj actually pulled out of this fight. I'm not sure why. I think it would have been an injury or something like that, but I'm really disappointed because I was really looking forward to seeing that fight, because I feel that Michael Morales, when he builds into his fights, he will always start to look for those takedowns. And I'd have loved to have seen the grappling exchanges between Morales and Brahimaj, because Brahimaj is a good grappler as well. But with Fugitt's got a good all-round game. He is a decent grappler himself. He's got numerous submissions. He's got numerous knockouts. He's one of these all-round type fighters that have come from the LFA, which was his last fight, and he can do a little bit of everything, and he's awkward, and I think he's probably going to win some fights in the UFC. But right now against Michael Morales, I think Morales is more dangerous on the feet. He's more dangerous in regards to his submission game as well. He's wrestling, he's got the edge in. He's striking, he's got the edge in. Grappling, he's got the edge in. It's a difficult fight for Fugitt, but obviously he's going to get a UFC contract by stepping in on short notice. It's tough to see Michael Morales getting beaten here, whether he's taken out or on the scorecards. I just don't see either outcome. I think Michael Morales has got the finishing upside. I think he'll win a decision should it go there. So I'm picking Michael Morales to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Yeon Kim versus Joselyne Edwards. And I think this is going to be one of those fights that's just going to be very close. It's likely going to go to a decision. We're probably going to be sat there not knowing who's won, which way it's going. It could possibly be a split decision as well. It's a fight that's more than likely going to be won and lost on the feet. Because of that, the volume's likely going to be close. Both women are going to have moments where they're moving forwards, being aggressive, moving on the back foot as well. I think both women are going to land, like I've already said, a similar amount of volume. They're both well matched. It's a really well matched fight, and it's one of those that I think is just going to be a very difficult fight to score for the judges. I think it is likely going to the judges' scorecards. I'm not convinced we'll see a finish here. I think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet, and that way, if there is a finish, one fighter's going to have to get a knockout or, drop their opponent or hurt them badly. I just don't think we're going to see that happen. And like I said, I think that it's going to be a close fight. Now, I'm going to have to side with somebody, so I'm always going to side with the underdog in a fight like this. And I do feel that with Yeon Kim as well, she's fought some good competition as well, better competition than Edwards. So again, if you're looking for slight edges, the minimal edges in this fight, I think are sliding slightly over to Yeon Kim. And that's ultimately where I am leaning, because of the experience, because she's been there against better level competition, and because she is a good striker, and that's where she likes to keep fights. I think she's going to get the fight she wants here. Like I said, I think it's going to be ultra close, but I'm siding with Yeon Kim to win this fight. And talking of fighters' names that are sometimes very difficult to say, in the next fight, we've got Negumereanu versus the newcomer Ihor Potieria. And Ihor Potieria is a fighter that looks a little bit of a meathead, if I'm being honest. You look at his tape, I think he is very aggressive. He comes forward, he likes to throw big power, and he mixes kicks in with his punches. But we've seen him taken down in fights, overexert himself, looking to be overly aggressive, and he's been taken down because of that. He can look a little bit lost when you take him down. And this is where I think Negumereanu has got to really think about what he's doing in this fight, because Negumereanu does like to strike. He likes to put power behind his strikes, but he does have a sneaky good wrestling game, a good takedown game, where he could potentially really stifle Potieria, not just from the fact that it looks like Potieria could have some holes on the ground when he's on his back, but if he's being overly aggressive, the way that Potieria is going to win this fight is by absolutely crowding Negumereanu with volume, overwhelming him and potentially hurting him and putting him out, and just making Negumereanu freeze in those moments and not be able to push forwards. But if Negumereanu comes into this fight and he does come with that wrestling game plan, I really think that he can stifle Potieria and cause hesitancy on Potieria's side of not wanting to come forward and overexert or strike because of the fear of getting taken down. So I think that's where Negumereanu, his advantages will be in this fight if he can get the takedowns. But outside of that, I think the fight is actually going to be relatively close. I think Potieria's got definitely a finishing upside because of how aggressive and dangerous he can look on the feet and be on the feet. But with Negumereanu, I think that he can strike. He's not a fish out of water, and he's won fights in the UFC. that's the other thing with Potieria. You've got to question some of the level of his competition in previous fights as well. So again, that's another concern that I've got. I'm actually going to be siding with the fighter that, again, like I said with Dante Almeida, the fighter that I trust a little bit more, the fighter that's been in the UFC, that's fought numerous fights in the UFC, that's got UFC wins as well. So for that reason, I'm picking Negumereanu to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Orion Cosce versus Blood Diamond. I absolutely love that name, Blood Diamond. You know, that's the one that he goes with. I think his real name is Mike Mateta, or Mateta, however that's pronounced, but we'll go with Blood Diamond in this fight. I think, though, for as cool as that name is, I do think that Blood Diamond is still very, very raw. I think he's still very green. I'm not convinced just yet as a UFC caliber fighter. The commentary in his last fight, and this is the thing, by the way, in the last fight he fought Jeremiah Wells, so you can't take too much away from that, because Jeremiah Wells is genuinely a really good fighter and a really difficult fighter to beat. And then when you look outside of the UFC, outside of that fight for Blood Diamond, there's not too much footage on him. But the commentators are all raving about his striking, how good of a striker he is. But actually the footage that you see outside of the UFC, although it being minimal, is more than being a grappler than a fighter that's, you know, a kickboxer, Thai fighter on the feet. So with Blood Diamond, even though we have seen moments of him on the feet, even though we've seen moments grappling, he just looks like a very green fighter, very raw fighter still. And because of that, I do struggle to pick him to win fights in the UFC, because Orion Cosce, although he's a fighter that's still going to be finding his feet in MMA and in the UFC, obviously last time out against Phil Rowe, he had some good moments in that fight. Ultimately, he lost, but his wrestling's okay. He can score takedowns. He's got decent topside grappling. And also, he's got some power and good forward pressure. And I think it's going to make for an interesting fight here, because I think Blood Diamond is going to have to establish something early in this fight. Otherwise, Cosce is just going to really be able to build his way into this fight. And I think the longer the fight goes on, the more difficult it is for Blood Diamond to beat Cosce, because of the way Cosce fights in regards to that wrestling approach and just, again, closing the distance quickly, getting a hold of his opponents. That's the type of fighter Cosce is. I think Blood Diamond's going to have problems in this fight. Again, I'm not 100% convinced that he's ready for the UFC, just because from what I have seen, his skill set, and I know I've said this 3 times now, just seems a bit raw, a bit green. And I don't know whether he just needs to go outside of the UFC, build up a few more fights, because again, he's relatively new to MMA. But right now, for this fight, the fighter that I am siding with is the fighter that has fought a better level of competition in the UFC in regards to being competitive with them, because obviously they're both 0-1. But he was competitive enough with Phil Rowe to make me think that he's going to be okay here with Blood Diamond. So I'm picking Orion Cosce to win this fight. And that's it for the UFC 277 breakdowns and predictions from myself at MMA Play 365. As always, we appreciate all the subscriptions to the MMA Play 365 YouTube channel, all the likes to this video and to the previous videos as well, and also the kind comments that I get personally every single week in regards to the analysis and the predictions that I'm giving out to you guys. Honestly, it does mean a lot, so thank you for that. If you are betting this weekend, I hope you absolutely smash it. Drop your bets in the comments as well, so we can see who you're on and why. Aside from that, I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.